All right, so this week we're going to talk about anthropometrics. I always have to say that one slowly because it's a big word. Um, but it's a very interesting concept. So, anthropometrics is the scientific study of the human body and its proportions. Um, and it includes things like our reach, um, when we kneel or squat, how much space that takes up, what we need. Um, it's based on the average body. So, and lots of times there's a range now because we know there's not really like one average as it goes through. But what this does, and this is used highly used by furniture manufacturers, and then we will use it for space planning as well. But it provides information so that we know how much space is needed to design environments. So the example you see here of two people sitting at a table, it comes into play as to how tall a table should be to where it's comfortable for most people. How tall should a seat height be? So the standard seat height is 18 inches, and that is based on where most of us are comfortable as we sit, as we go through. You have information here on how far you need from the back of the booth to the front of the table. Um, and if you've ever been into a restaurant where they've adjusted the booths, so maybe they had a larger party at one of them, and so another one got like smushed together, or somebody didn't set it up correctly after they clean. Um, I have we have sat in a couple or been placed in a couple where the table's like right up against you and it's extremely uncomfortable. Um, and and we would always like once someone had moved on the other side, be like, please, can you shift this so that it's comfortable to sit? But so it's good to know, like, this is why this information is here, so people are working. On this lower one, it gives you information as far as like the activity zone, the circulation, all of that, so that there's space to move around where it makes sense as you go through it. In kitchen design, this is highly used. So this is what helps you determine how high the countertop should be, how much space you need between like the range and your cabinets behind you. And it shows you the reason that is the number we have is because if this is open and you are squatting down to get something out, that's what you need. It gives you heights for what you can reach. And you can see here just even again, they're going by like quote unquote average male, average female, but what the reach is and how that's different. So, this is why it's really important to understand your clients, who they are as you're designing, and also with kitchen design to give a variety of heights so that it can accommodate a lot of people as they go into it. Dining spaces are another big one where it goes through and it gives you information. And through to read these um, diagrams, you'll see like it says C here. You come over to C and it says 30 inches. So it's telling you that you need 30 inches roughly for someone to sit and for their comfortable space to be here. And then B, this is showing you 12 inches on either side. And that just gives you, make sure that there's space for everyone as it goes around. So this is optimum table width. This is not minimum. Okay, so lots of times, especially in restaurants, you'll work more with what the minimum is. So I think that's more like 22 inches for someone to sit. But especially in a home, you want to give that optimum as much as possible. All right, you do not need to look and read through all of this. It's really just the visual that is the impact for this. When it comes into the office and the workspace, there is a lot that's going on. So at a desk in the workspace, people are often sitting for hours on end, which is not what our body is designed to do. Um, and so it can cause a lot of ergonomic issues. So this is basically showing you the study of like where people should be looking at their computer, what the angle of their arms should be, what the angle of their legs should be. And this is where, with furniture vendors, how it comes into play is making sure that there's adjustability in the desks and the table surfaces and the chairs so that it can meet the majority of people as you go through it. Steelcase has some great resources, so I would encourage you to take a look at this article here. But from that image I just showed you, this image here is more up to date. We don't just work on a desktop computer. You know, lots of times you may have a monitor that you're working off of, you may have a laptop, you may have a tablet, you may have a phone, you may be reading information. And as we do each of those and work on each of those different items, the way we move changes. So it's even more important to understand how we move and to create spaces that will allow these different postures to happen. It's really better for us, for our bodies as we go through it. So that comes into play both with the types of furniture that the companies are offering, and it also comes into play in the types of spaces that you as the designer create. So in an office environment, you may not just have a desk that you're sitting at, but maybe you also create spaces that have spaces where you can recline. Maybe it's more of a lounge type environment, so that you can move through those different postures and have options as you go through it. Okay, and that's what I just talked about. So the other part, as we move towards a more global work environment, the demographics in the workplace have changed. So it used to be that the average bill for a man or woman was really more like country specific. And the original averages and like what houses were built for in the 60s, 70s, etc., are very different than what we see now. And that's very apparent if you walk into an older home and you see like the heights of cabinets or the heights of door openings versus what we do today. So understanding that there is a wide range of people and body types and abilities that we are working with, and this pulls into universal design, it's really important to make sure that you are meeting all of those as you go through it. The other part that comes into design is sociology. So we have probably the greatest number of generations in the workplace that we ever have. You have everyone from people that are just entering the workforce right out of college, so maybe very young 20s, all the way up to, there's people still in their 70s that are working. And each of those generations works very differently, depending on, where they prefer to work, lots of time, and how they prefer to work. So younger generations are more used to working together, working, not at a desk necessarily. They may prefer to do more group work. And older generations are used to coming in, sitting at their desk, getting their work done. If they have a meeting, they go to a meeting room and they have that space there. So having different types of spaces is really important as you plan out and giving variety for the groups that are there. You're going to have different personalities, different generations, different work responsibilities that all influences how they work throughout the day. So whether they're doing a lot of meetings, individual work, if they're working on paper, if they're working digitally. So you need to understand that when you are space planning in a work environment. So proxemics. So this week is apparently the week of big scientific words and what they mean. But they're all interesting and they all play a big part into a successful space plan. So proxemics is the study of distance between people as they interact. So this is what we are comfortable with. And this does change very much so between cultures. I don't that's probably the biggest one. I don't know if there's a big change between generations, but and obviously personalities can change this as well. We all know the people that have no personal space, no personal bubble, and then we have others that have a very large personal bubble as they go through. So intimate is considered 6 inches to 8 inches. This is people like in your immediate family, you know, people that you know very, very well and you're extremely comfortable with. Personal is 18 inches to 48 inches. So these are people that you know, probably your friends, but you know, maybe not someone you're comfortable snuggling right next to the couch with. Social, these are people that you know their name or you interact at work or school or something like that. And this is 4 foot to 12 feet is what you're comfortable with. And then public is 12 feet to 25 feet. So this is where, like at a doctor's office, when you walk in and there's people there, but you don't know them. And let's ignore the fact that, let's say dentist office. Okay. So because doctor's office, there's that added level of you don't want to be close to someone that's sick. But when you walk into a dentist office, most of us will walk towards the most empty area because we don't want to sit right next to someone. So this plays a really big part as you are laying out, for instance, a waiting room in a dental office. Sofas are not a great use because it may work for like if there's a mom and her children, you know, they'll all sit there. But if you have 4 different individuals that come in, they're not going to want to sit right next to each other, especially with nothing dividing them. Now, you could put 4 chairs with arms, and you are more likely for people to sit with those because there's some sort of divider between them. But it is even better to do very small groupings of like 2, maybe 3 chairs and spread them around, put a table in between it, put a plant in between it, something so they feel like they've got some barrier between others. Comfort in design is huge in space planning, and this comes into more than just what you look at on your 2-dimensional floor plan. Okay, this takes into account your 3-dimensional space. So when we are talking about space planning, a lot of it we are going to be drawing on a 2-dimensional floor plan, but you always want to keep in mind that 3-dimensional space and what's going on. So you want to create human scale rooms. So they're not too large or too small. You don't want to have, for everywhere you go, you don't want to have 20-foot ceilings because that's going to be uncomfortable. There are certain places where it makes sense and it makes an impact and you intentionally put in a 20-foot ceiling, but you also want areas where it is more, the ceilings are more, 10 feet or something like that, where it's a human scale. You want comfortable furniture, so something that people they can sit in or lounge in for long periods of time. You want to control noise. So understand how the noise is coming, where it's coming from. So this, this illustration right here, someone talking over here, you don't want that noise traveling into where someone's working. So you need to understand how that works and what you can do to mitigate it as it goes through. Good lighting. So understanding like with this lighting where someone is standing and also understanding where it's sitting, that it's not hitting them right in the eyes. If they are sitting at a desk, you don't want them to have constant sunlight in their eyes. So understanding how that works so that it bounces off and that it hits at the right angles. Good ventilation, so making sure that there is air movement throughout, and then shade and protection from the elements. So you see the difference in where someone has just a space to lean against versus a covered space versus more controlled and they have access for comfort throughout. So all of those things, again, they're not necessarily going to show on a 2-dimensional floor plan, but are things you need to keep in mind as you're going through it. Ergonomics, I used this word earlier, but this is really where you're using that anthropometric data to create the designs that keep your, that works for the body and does not create strain or overuse on anything. So it's all about the ease of use. And and it makes sure that items don't create stress. You can use it easily. You try to avoid repetitive motions, or if there is something where there's a repetitive motion, you want to make sure that it's done in a way that is not going to create strain on the body. Being able to personalize or adjust a workspace is one of the most effective ways in an ergonomic workspace. And workplaces is where you will see this more often than really your home or a residential space. In a residential space, people are moving throughout the day constantly. So you're usually not sitting in one place for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. When you're working, that can happen. So choosing the correct furniture that allows people to adjust their chair, adjust their desk height, all of that will help. Human Tech is a really good brand for, they focus on ergonomics. So they're a great one to check out. They offer information on workspaces, or they offer products, whether it's at home or it's in the office, because we are having people that are working from home more. Is becoming more common, and you do want to make sure that that home office is ergonomic. So they offer common elements. What they've listed are a chair, a work surface, a keyboard, a mouse or another input device, monitor and screen, a phone, and then any other mobile devices. So they're saying that's what's usually in an office. There's 4 main adjustments as Human Tech lists it. Height and support of the task chair. So that's the chair that you're sitting in when you're working at the desk. Height and location of the keyboard. That impacts the angle of your arm as you're working and your wrist. Height and placement of the monitor. That impacts your neck strain as far as making sure you are not putting too much strain, looking too high up or too far down. And then the location of your mouse or your input device. So making sure that that's not straining items. Universal design, you have heard this before, or you will hear it again. It's really important in creating the best spaces you can. So the next step from ergonomics is universal design. So making sure that you're creating spaces that are accessible and easy to use for the maximum amount of people. So you're trying to meet the needs of the majority of users without drawing attention. So this is again where that adjustability of desks and chairs will help with that as it goes through. There are special populations. So this is not disabilities, but these are populations that exist. So some examples are limited motion, limited hearing, limited vision, elderly, etc. People don't just fall into one of these. Sometimes they're a little bit of both. And it's not like you're here and you stay here. You may be in one of these at one time and then out of it at another. For instance, if you've ever broken an arm or broken a leg, then you fall into that limited motion category for a period of time. And in that time, you will probably gain a lot of appreciation for universal design elements that are created for those with limited motion. I broke my leg at one point. I was on crutches for several weeks and was extremely grateful for all of the things that were put in place. Most of these for like ADA accessibility for doors and restrooms and all, but it helps a lot when you're on crutches as well. There's not always one answer, and sometimes there's conflicting needs. So it's really just about choosing the best, what's going to meet the most people as possible. And again, this it's not trying to put people into categories. It's just addressing some similar needs and recognizing that people fall into these at different times. And sometimes there are opposing needs too as you go through it. So, one group may need a ramp and another group may do better with stairs. So it's just understanding that and working through it. Separate from universal design is ADA. So this is the American with Disabilities Act. It was created in 1990 and became law in 92. So this is barrier-free design that enables users to have clear access throughout the building and safe egress in case of emergencies. It is for public buildings. Private buildings are not regulated, so this does not come into play for residential spaces. It is public spaces. Universal design is ethical, so it's not regulated. Accessible design is regulated. The interesting thing the thing to kind of know about accessible design too is it's separate than, it's managed separately than building codes. So building codes, you have a codes department that is going to review it while you design it, while it's built, to make sure that it meets those codes. You do not have a codes enforcement or a codes review for ADA that comes through it. So it comes into play where companies become liable for a lawsuit if they do not meet these and it causes an issue for someone. So this is a designer's responsibility to the company more so than to the local codes jurisdiction. Some key areas to keep in mind with this are stairs and level entries. Access, so how wide are your doors? Are they easy to get in and out for someone that's in a wheelchair or has a walker or a cane or anything like that, crutches? Kitchens are a key area in the home. So this is, again, these are not monitored by ADA, but this is where it's important as you're designing to keep it in mind. So with kitchens, knowing the heights of items, how that they can access things as they go through it. And then bathrooms, making sure they have access to fixtures, grab bars, faucets, so they can easily move throughout that space. So for kitchens, you're going to think through how they approach items. You're going to think through how they are able to roll up underneath surfaces when they go through. A lot of these are based on wheelchair access because that's probably the one that takes the most space as it goes through, but there are others that are impacted as well. Counter depths, 24 inches is standard anyways, so that helps with that. Thinking through things like having adjustable heights of upper cabinets. They have pull-down cabinets, making sure your cabinet hardware matches these. And again, AFF stands for above finished floor. So we mentioned making sure there's space underneath it. Also, sinks, this is for kitchens and bathrooms. Any pipes that are open, so if there's not like woodwork in front of it, they need to be insulated. If someone is paralyzed, their legs can't feel that the pipe is hot and it can cause a burn. Think through having the sink controls mounted on the side instead of the back, makes them easier to reach. Things like pull-out shelves. You may not want back burners. So if you are designing a space for someone that has some accessible needs, there's a lot of different ways to make sure you meet their needs as you go through it. In bathrooms, the entryway is important, as well as the clear turning space to make sure they can get in and out. Things like not putting a cabinet under a sink so they can get in there, make sure that the grab bars are spaced correctly and anchored well, providing a bench in the shower. You can do things like lowering the temperature on hot water heaters, tilted mirrors. There's a lot that goes into this. For some of our studio classes, we work with SWORD, Sunshine on a Rainy Day, and they are a nonprofit company that does design and updates. Mainly, they do bedrooms, bathrooms, and therapy rooms for families that have children with disabilities. So if you are able to work on one of those projects when it comes up, you will go through a lot of these items and see a lot of this in play to make sure that it works for the families. Bedrooms are another thing that we often don't think about, and it's just some very simple things that make a big difference, like making sure the mattress height is equal to the wheelchair seat height, The nightstand height is equal to the bed height, so it's all easy to reach. Headboards and footboards with slats can actually act as grab bars to help people transfer from a wheelchair to the bed. And then again, making sure you have those clearances. Some other items to think through, there's some general placements for outlets and switches so they're easy to reach. Thinking through just making sure there's at least one turning space in each room so it's easy to get in and out. D-shaped drawer pulls, so these are the ones where you can kind of get your fingers underneath to pull. These make it easier to open. And then crank operated casement windows are easier to open than a sash window. So just kind of to keep that in mind. We don't see a lot of casement windows in the South because lots of times we do have screens because just in our area, we're all on like central air now for the most part. But historically, we have weather where we can open the windows and let breeze in as it goes through. Okay, egress routes are another big part of your overall space planning items that you need to look at. So these are based on the occupancy categories set by the International Building Code. We're not going to get too much into what these are. You will talk about this more in codes. But this just gives you some information on what it looks like and why it's important to often have two egress routes in case one is blocked by smoke or fire. And then finally, your exit and door requirement. This is important as far as the number of exits and doors that you need by occupancy type. The common path of travel. This is where the distance occupants have to travel before they reach a point with two options. So how far they need to go before they've got a couple of options to the side. And then a dead-end corridor is a corridor with no means of egress at one end. This is limited, so you want to avoid these as you go through it because basically someone going down this way, when they get to this wall, they can't exit and they have to turn around and it costs them valuable time as they go through. So another thing to keep in mind as you are designing. So go ahead and follow up with your reading for this week. Go through the guided reading suggestion and we will go through those questions and review in class.